Hello and welcome to your weekly astrological forecast for the week beginning the 25th of August 2014, where we take a look at some of the astrological aspects for the week ahead through the ancient art and science of Vedic astrology. Okay. Sometimes we forget with astrology that there are things going on in the background. Quite often we're only really aware of the aspects that are there for the week, but there are sometimes aspects that are ongoing and last several months, and they really tend to color the astrological scenery. That's probably the best terminology I can think of. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on that level, which are affecting things globally and also individually for each of us. There's the macrocosm, the greater whole, and then there's the microcosm and how we're all going through these particular trials and challenges and difficulties. Something I want to talk about in getting to the root of this are the south node, which in Vedic astrology is called Ketu, and the north node, which is called Rahu. These are the points that deal with karma, past karma, and what happens in the resolution of that past karma within the present time. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. Ketu is related to that past karma, but in astrology, Ketu is also called the dragon's tail. And where you have the tail divorced from the head, separated from the head, then you have very chaotic energy quite often. And the south node, or Ketu, which we will call it from now on, when Ketu comes into contact with another planet, it tends to make that planet even more chaotic. And right now, if you look over here, I'm going to circle this just so I can bring this to your focus for even greater emphasis, because it's really important to understand this on a deeper level. We've got Ketu and Uranus right here. Now, Uranus itself is already very chaotic. It's the planet of the unexpected, the random, the radical, and also the revolutionary. And when we have Ketu close to that, it makes things even more scattered. Things are happening right and left, and we have no idea where all these experiences are coming from. But because both of these planets are in a section of the sky that's called Revati, we can sense that the scenery is changing. On the global scale, the scenery is most definitely changing, and I'm sure within each of our lives, the scenery is also changing. Now, if that wasn't enough, and if that wasn't powerful enough, before we get into the astrological aspects for the week, let me take that away, and I'll just bring my cursor down to point here. We also have, at the beginning of the week, let me get the date right, actually on the same day as the new moon, which is today, we start the week off with a new moon, we've had a conjunction of Saturn and Mars. Now, they're a bit off in their aspect with Uranus, but they're forming an aspect with Uranus which is tense and can be somewhat inflammatory. Okay, Saturn likes structure. Uranus is everything but structure. So the old structures that used to work are no longer going to function, and we can sense that. Okay, and with Mars conjuncting Saturn, Mars likes a lot of action. Saturn likes to be patient and take things slowly, so it's creating a lot of tension. They're both in a section of the sky that's called Vishaka. Vishaka is a very confusing energy because on one level, Vishaka itself likes to sit still and wait for the right things to become apparent to it, but it also likes to be molded or shifted or adjusted. So with Mars there, the change is wanting to happen, but there's a lot of uncertainty that's brewing beneath the surface, right? In addition to that, we've got an ongoing harmonious aspect, but harmonious between two very powerful planets does not always mean nice, and in this case it's pretty intense. You've got Saturn and Pluto, who for a while have been forming a sextile with each other, and they're beginning to separate, but that itself is pretty powerful. Pluto is in Purva Ashadha, and what Purva Ashadha relates to is authenticity, being straightforward. On the external level, that's what it relates to. We won't go into depth on the more spiritual side of it, because we're concerned mainly with how this is manifesting in our lives, which does relate to the spiritual as well. That probably wasn't the best analogy to use, but being much more authentic. Let's put it this way, on the global scale, let's say the gloves are coming off. Okay, on the individual level, it's probably happening a little bit as well. Now, I don't want you to feel necessarily upset or bothered or like I'm preaching doom and gloom to you, because in astrology it doesn't function that way. The universe is only concerned with evolution. So this does bring a change about that is more powerful and positive. And we start the week off with a new moon, and we would have to go back a little bit of time in order to, and we can do that, in order to show that the new moon, well, actually we won't do that. It says down here in the bottom right-hand corner PPH, which is for Purva Palguni. But earlier in the day, the new moon actually happened in a section of the sky that's called Magha. So a lot of that is about learning from past mistakes, becoming stronger in ourselves, having to set some boundaries with another person. But overall, the tone is quite positive. We sense that there can be some movement for the future, and I touched on this in my new moon audio. There can be movement for the future if all parties involved sacrifice some of their own needs for something which is of the greater good in order for the transformation to happen. Now, in all cases, this may not work, because in some instances, people just have to agree to disagree. But if even that in itself can be something that contributes to the greater good. So we had a very powerful new moon which coincided with a harmonious aspect between Mars and Mercury, looking at the future course of action, because we're talking about Vishaka again, and that would relate to that. We've also got Mercury forming a sextile with Saturn, so Mars and Saturn, that conjunction we were talking about, that tension and knowing that movement needs to happen, but still not quite certain if we're ready for it. Mercury is going to mean we're going to be thinking about it, we're going to be talking about it, and trying to find a way forward. We're going to talk about the aspects that are going on early in the week first, okay? Mixed in with that, you've got Venus over here, forming a harmonious trine with Uranus. Venus in Leo and Uranus in Aries. Venus is in Ashlesha, and Ashlesha is related to serpents, everything that serpents are associated with. On one level, it's the shedding of skin, so moving on. On another level, it's wisdom, potential, as we're talking about us. Serpents are also related to the Kundalini energy, so it's finding the potential, learning from the wisdom of the past. But also, serpents can tend to bite occasionally and unexpectedly. And when you're dealing with Uranian energy, that can actually be the case. So there can be some issues involved with pride or dignity or feeling like we need to stand our ground. And these unexpected circumstances begin to rise to the surface and create a lot of very potent energy, which can be uncomfortable, but it can also be very transformational. At the same time that this is going on, Venus is forming a tense aspect with both Saturn and Mars. Whenever Venus and Mars are squaring each other, that's going to mean some tension in relationships. Saturn will create a lot of restriction, feeling like we're not really able to move things in the way that either one party wants or all parties want. Okay, so that's early in the week. Later on in the week, we also have some building aspects between the Sun and Neptune. I'm going to move this forward a little bit. Let me move that so it doesn't block your view. But let's move a few days into the future. I think we're looking at the 29th. And we'll notice that the Sun has moved forward. It's still in Purva Palguni. And at the time that it's forming this aspect with with Neptune, the energy is one of needing to see what's going on beneath the surface. But over the course of the week, because Neptune is in a section of the sky that I was talking about before called Shatabisha, and Shatabisha can bring a healing crisis to the surface, sometimes quite dramatic, which draws us in. And by drawing us in, a transformation happens. We realize something that had been occluded or hidden from our vision that we didn't see initially. It becomes much clearer. Okay, so again, this can bring, through the dramas and conflagrations which might go on over the course of the week, something gets revealed, because guess what's going on in the background? We've got Sun and Pluto trining each other. That always means something that has been hidden coming to the surface, becoming more apparent. So this aspect, which will also be forming a harmonious alignment with Saturn, suggests that a way forward can be found. But this way forward is not going to be found in a manner that is simple. There's going to be some discomfort for some of the parties involved. Remember the things that are most important. And I touched on this in the new moon video, and it's something that's quite important. We've got two different concepts. We've got pride and we've got dignity. Dignity is connected to our relationship to our soul. We can also have our physical dignity. We want to, look comfortable. Look nice and present a good appearance to the external world. That's, more personal and physical dignity. And then there's the internal dignity, which is soul-related. Sometimes the two are tied into each other. And I'm by no means saying that physical dignity is related to pride, but we're going to go to the pride side of things, because dignity on some levels can never be affected, detracted from. Sometimes we might feel embarrassed, but if we go inside into the space of the soul, our dignity is always intact. It's not the same with pride. Pride is something that is related purely to the ego, purely to the mind and the intellect. Pride is something that when we take a look at when our pride has been hurt, we usually build up a stronger sense of dignity, as a matter of fact. So we need to understand very deeply the difference between pride and dignity this week. If something hits us and it feels uncomfortable for us to take a look at, then it can be helpful to take a look at it, because there's usually a very profound gift that's beneath the surface of the difficulty that we may be dealing with. And there are a lot of challenges over the course of the week as the moon makes its journey through Virgo into Libra and on into Scorpio, where things can get a little bit intense and heated for the moon. So it is a powerful week. It is a very tense week. It brings positive changes, though, which are coming in the future. They're most definitely there, but we have to get through this period of tension first. A lot of old karma coming to the surface to be healed, but as it comes to the surface, there's a lot of difficulty in dealing with it, looking at it, and understanding it. And we may feel somewhat self-conscious as a result. Self-consciousness, when dealt with appropriately, can lead to self-analysis. Self-analysis can lead to self-understanding. That's the point, that the healing happens is when we finally switch to a space of self-acceptance. So any difficulty that's there, look at how you can work on it internally. Look at how you can work on it with another. If you can't work on it with another in the moment because there's too much tension involved, step back from the situation. Take it within yourself. Digest it. It may feel like things are moving 20,000 miles a minute, and indeed they are on the evolutionary scale, but this is a powerful opportunity and not just a difficult challenge. That's going to do it for your weekly astrological forecast. Until next time, I do hope that you'll take very good care of yourself.